Today, we're going to talk about a ship that was supposed to be literally invincible, a true monster of the seas, a weapon so secret its own side barely knew about it, and yet, it became one of the biggest naval disasters of World War II. This is the incredible and incredibly short story of the Japanese aircraft carrier Shinano.
So, right off the bat, here's the central mystery we're trying to solve. How does the largest, most heavily armored aircraft carrier on the entire planet go down on its maiden voyage? I mean, this isn't just an accident. It's a true howdunit of naval history. And the answer is, well, it's pretty shocking. And here she is. Just take a look at that thing. This is the Shinano during her sea trials. She was an absolute giant, a super carrier designed to be the unshakable backbone of the Japanese fleet. But, as you'll see, her story ends almost as soon as it begins.
Now this is what makes the story so wild. You'd think a ship this massive would need a whole fleet, right? Or maybe a massive aerial bombardment to take it down. But no, the Shinano was sunk by just 4 torpedoes from one American submarine. 4 hits, that's it. So how on earth is that even possible?
To really understand what happened, we can't just start with the sinking. We have to go back to the beginning, because her origins, what she was meant to be, hold the key to this entire story.
See, here's the first major twist. Shinano wasn't even supposed to be an aircraft carrier. She started her life as the 3rd sister ship in the legendary Yamato-class. And if you know your history, you know these were the largest, most powerful battleships ever built. Period. Her DNA was that of a brawler, a floating fortress.
And the secrecy around her was just next level. Japan considered her a war-winning weapon. A massive fence was built just to hide her from view. The workers were basically locked in the shipyard, and just mentioning the ship's name was a crime punishable by death. She was a ghost ship, a phantom on the docks. And if you want a number to wrap your head around her size, here it is, almost 66,000 tons. To put that in perspective, she was the heaviest aircraft carrier built anywhere in the world, and she held that record until 1954, nearly a decade after the war was over. An absolute monster of a ship. But then, halfway through her construction, the entire nature of the war in the Pacific changed dramatically. And with it, Shinano's destiny took a sharp, desperate turn. Her whole reason for being was about to get a complete rewrite.
So this is the turning point. In June of 1942, Japan suffers a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Midway. They lose 4 of their best aircraft carriers in a single day. All of a sudden, giant battleships didn't seem so important anymore. Carriers were what mattered. So the order came down, stop building the battleship and convert that massive, unfinished hull into an aircraft carrier.
But here's the thing, she couldn't become a normal frontline carrier. The conversion was too far along for that. So instead, her new job was to be a massive support carrier. Think of her less as a fighter and more as a floating fortress and supply base, a giant that would sail behind the main fleet, rearming and refueling other carriers on the front lines. This desperate pivot, this sudden change from battleship to carrier, created a huge problem. The pressure to get this new ship into the fight led to some incredibly dangerous shortcuts. And right here, this is where we find the real seed of the ship's destruction. You know, her captain, Toshio Abe, he knew his ship wasn't ready. He actually begged for a delay. And look at this list of problems he presented. The ship was basically a sieve. Most of the watertight doors hadn't even been installed. There were unsealed holes everywhere between compartments. The main fire and bailing systems didn't even work. And the crew? They hadn't even been trained on how to use the emergency pumps. Despite all this, his request was denied. The ship had to sail. So the bottom line is this. The insane rush to finish her meant that Shinano was fundamentally compromised. Shoddy workmanship was everywhere. She was a giant, yes, but she was a fragile one, sent out to sea long before she was actually complete. And so, on November 28, 1944, this unfinished behemoth slipped out of port on her very first, and as it turns out, her very last voyage. What followed was a terrifying 17-hour countdown to total disaster. And here is her adversary, the American submarine, the USS Archerfish. While Shinano and her escort ships were trying to sneak out under the cover of darkness, Archerfish was already out there, waiting. It had picked them up on radar, and a deadly game of cat and mouse was about to begin. Now right here, Captain Abe makes a critical, fatal error in judgment. When he realizes there's a submarine tailing them, he assumes the worst. He thinks the Archerfish is just bait, a decoy for a whole pack of American subs waiting to ambush him. So instead of turning to fight the one sub he knows is there, he tries to outrun it, tragically underestimating the threat. At 3:15 in the morning, Archerfish got its shot. It fired 6 torpedoes, and 4 of them slammed home. This diagram shows exactly where they hit, all along the starboard side. Now the damage was severe, but honestly, on a ship this size, it absolutely should have been survivable. But remember, she was unfinished. And what happened next was this slow, agonizing, but totally inevitable chain reaction. Because those watertight compartments weren't sealed, the flooding was just unstoppable. The ship started to list, and it just kept getting worse. Within a few hours, the engines died. By mid-morning, everyone knew the ship was lost. And then, just before 11 a.m., less than 17 hours after she left port, the largest aircraft carrier in the world rolled over and sank. The human cost was just immense. 1,435 sailors, officers, and civilian workers went down with the ship, including Captain Abe, who chose to stay with his command. Just a devastating end to such a short story. Well, after the war, investigators could finally piece the whole story together. They finally figured out why this supposedly unsinkable ship was, in fact, so tragically vulnerable. And this just shows you how incredibly effective that Japanese secrecy was. When the commander of the Archerfish reported that he'd sunk a massive carrier, U.S. naval intelligence literally did not believe him. They actually took away his credit for the kill at first, because the Shinano was such a well-kept secret, they didn't even know she existed. The post-war investigation revealed it was just a perfect storm of failure. First, there was a critical design flaw, one she actually shared with her battleship's sisters. A weak joint right at the waterline, exactly where all 4 torpedoes hit. But the operational failures were just as bad, if not worse. No one ever even tested if the compartments were watertight. In fact, survivors later reported hearing air hissing and rushing through the gaps in the bulkhead doors. It was a clear sign the ship's defenses against flooding were basically non-existent from the start. So that leaves us with the big question. Was the Shinano a fatally flawed giant from the very beginning, doomed by its rushed construction and a poor design? Or was she just a victim of bad luck, of being in the wrong place at the wrong time in a desperate war? The answer, most likely, is a tragic combination of both.